Hello. My name is Meg Mitchell. I'm a professor here in the art department, and I have the great honor this evening of introducing Amy Franceschini. And before I get started, I just wanted to mention that this semester, the Arts Institute and the art department, along with the departments of Design Studies, Horticulture, and Community and Environmental Sociology, are honored to welcome Amy as the Spring 2016 Interdisciplinary Arts Residency. So she'll be here all semester doing her amazing work. Just a short bio of Amy. Amy Franceschini is a social artist, designer, and educator who creates formats for exchange and production that questions and challenges the social, cultural, and environmental systems through temporary and permanent public art. In 1995, Franceschini founded Future Farmers, an international collective of artists, activists, researchers, farmers, scientists, and architects who work together to propose alternatives to current social, political, and environmental systems. I hope you'll all join me in welcoming Amy Franceschini to Madison. Just a quick note, just a quick reminder that there are no digital devices permitted for this lecture. Also, students who just signed up for the course can meet Professor Scheer in the Kohler Art Library, which is directly above us. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to this afternoon. Before I begin, I want to give a big thank you to Meg Mitchell, Tom Loser, and Sylvia Rosenthal, who are three people who have been very supportive Madisonites and University of Wisconsin supporters of me being here. So I just want to thank you for making me feel really welcome. I also want to thank the Arts Institute, Emily and Kate, who have been my shepherds of getting my feet on the ground in Madison. But before we begin the lecture, today we're going to go on a journey. And this is our vessel. We're sitting in our vessel right now, and we're all the crew. We're going on a sailing journey. You all received a ticket to come on this journey, and this is also, in a sense, going to serve as an archive of our skill sets as a crew. I'm part of a collective called Future Farmers, which I'll talk about in a second, but one thing that we're very interested in is knowledge sharing and sharing our skills and challenging each other's skills. So first of all, what I need to do is I need a main crew of 8 people. Is anyone in this room a certified captain to sail a small wooden vessel? Can you come up to the front, please? We're going to have the crew sit in the front so we have a base. Nice. I need someone who's very confident in tying knots. It could be one knot. You could sit there. What's your name? Pua. We have a captain. That's awesome. A knot tire. Can someone feel very confident about a knot? Can you come up to the front? Oh, we have 2 knot tires? 1 knot tire. Okay, I just need 1. Okay, great. What knot are you going to tie? Come on, come back. You could also be the magician. All right. We need an archivist, someone who's very fastidious about keeping things dry and documenting our daily life. 1 archivist. Come on. Okay, perfect. We have an archivist. What's your name? I'm Danielle. Great. We need 2 able bodies. This is on request of our captain. Just some able bodies that can grab a rope, throw some water overboard. Perfect. We have 1 able body, another able body. Can you come up to the front? We have Bird, who I hope you can also navigate. Birds are great navigators. And what's your name? Able body number 2. What's your name? Jeff. Okay, we have able bodies. We need a chef who's, perfect, come up. This is pretty impossible, but we can only take 1 artist. Can we have an artist? Okay, there's an artist. The last request from our captain is a magician. Does anybody know any magic tricks? Oh, come on. Magician. Card game? Anything? All right, perfect. Magician, can you come up to the front? So now I'm feeling secure that we have a crew, a main crew, and we have a rotational crew out there. What I would like you to do is on this sheet, I gave some of you writing utensils, but I think you all have them, is to write down one skill that you have that you feel like you could contribute to a small seafaring journey on a old 1800 wooden boat that might be at sea without seeing the land for 4 or 5 days. This skill, think about a skill that's useful or poetic. It could be that you read Moby Dick and that we're in a storm and you're going to recite it by heart, but you know it by heart. It could be something very practical, like you know how to do basic electronics because there are some electronics on board. We have a radio. So just write one skill down, and I'm going to give you 1 minute to do that. Yes. Boop, 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 boop. Yes. And what's our archivist's name? Danielle. Danielle, when you're done writing your skill, can you collect the cards? Thank you. Some of you didn't get cards, and there's a saying that you missed the boat. Sorry. All right, I'm going to say 10 more seconds. How are you doing on skills? I think our archivist can start walking, and I'll start. So before we go on our journey, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on who Future Farmers is and what I am doing here, what we're doing here. So Future Farmers is a collective of people. This is a scrappy timeline that I tried to make. As Meg said, it was founded in 1994 by myself as really a desire to collaborate with a lot of people and learn from others. I also started an artist in residency program in 1994, and Future Farmers was a design studio doing mostly web design and print design. And we would use our profit to support artists to come from all over the world and work with us, and we would help them work on projects. So it was kind of a trade. And from this group of people, we've really established who we are. We're a kind of diverse group of practitioners who come together based on different projects that we're invited to. So you can apply to the residency. There's a webpage. We've taken a hiatus for the last 2 years, but next summer we'll start up again. There's sort of an ethos that we love to practice under, and we call it situational intelligence. It's kind of like if you tell a whole bunch of kids that they have to roll this stump up the stairs or down the stairs with just what they can find around, they'll figure out how to do it. They might hurt themselves, they might not. But we like to operate in a spirit of readiness where there's a potential for improvisation and chance to be part of our process. And that's one line of our work, and then I'm going to show you another line that's more, I would call durational and long-term and has deeper roots. But we do like to balance this, we like to work in this chasm between the temporary improvisational and the durational and rooted. I'm just going to show one project that for me captures the spirit of how we work. So this is a project called Erratum, Brief Interruptions in the Waste Stream. Does anybody know what an erratum is, or errata?
A list of mistakes.
Great. So in printmaking, when things were handset type, often there would be a human error, a spelling error, and the book would go out to people who had bought the book, and then maybe a year later you would get a slip of paper that said erratum, and it would say page 26. There, gesture was supposed to be spelled with an U, not a W. But we also like to think about these errors in terms of sculptural things or systems in our everyday life. So this is Michael Swain, who'll be here next week and is going to do a talk. We've been collaborating for 22 years now. And we had always had a fantasy about kind of celebrating our love and our hate for Marcel Duchamp. And we also wanted to celebrate our hate for the American toilet, this super wasteful thing that we have to deal with every day in our life. So we just decided to squat in a friend's theater and crush this toilet. And this is often how we work. We have kind of a seed of an idea, and then we just say, come on, let's do it, and see what the materials tell us, see what the process tells us. And by the time we schedule this action, we've done a lot of research, and a project will start to form. So what our idea was to take this highly inefficient system in our everyday life and try to make it efficient in some way. So we transformed this porcelain into a set of bricks that we refused into a book form. We worked with the Center for the Book in San Francisco and made these two Egyptian brick molds. One has the brick and the other has a set of cards that serve as a book to talk about the project and the research around this. Marcel Duchamp had this idea of the ready-made, right? He had this toilet idea. It's something that exists in the world. You bring it into the museum and it becomes art. But he also had this idea of the reverse ready-made, where you would take a Van Gogh painting and cut it out of the frame and use it as an ironing board. And for us, this was kind of liberating, like, wow, to take these things that are so revered and so protected and only seen by a very few and bring it into a daily practice. It's kind of something that we were thinking about in this time of this project. So now I'm going to prep us a little bit for the journey I talked about. In 2011, Future Farmers was invited to Norway in Oslo to participate in a public art project called Slow Space Norway. It's a public art project that takes place in a waterfront development called Bjørvika, and we were invited to do something in one of the common areas in this place. The common areas were considered open space or the National Library. We chose this green area here that's kind of highlighted that was not supposed to be developed for 12 years. It was kind of fallow land that struck an interest in us. And we asked if we could occupy that land now in 2012 and start to farm there. This area was formerly a port, primarily timber, and it was flanked with farms that fed the workers. And the king in the late 1800s said, we need to produce food for the farmers in a very close proximity. And I found this photo in the city archives, which is kind of a trick that I always do when I work somewhere, is to go to the historical archives and see what something was 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Also, if you propose something to a politician or a stakeholder, if they can see that it happened before, it's not so risky for them to do it again. So we formed a group, Future Farmers, called Flatbread Society, and it's a working group to produce this public art project. And it was inspired by the fact that every day we ate Norwegian flatbread, and also the neighborhood that flanks this port area is one of the most culturally diverse neighborhoods in Oslo. It's called Grunland. And in that neighborhood, you can smell other types of flatbread being baked: Pakistani, Iraqi, Afghani, Tunisian, Ethiopian. And we thought that flatbread would actually be an interesting currency that could connect different cultures in Oslo. Flatbread has a very strong national identity. Norway is a very young country, and most everyone you meet that's over 30 grew up on a farm. Flatbread was something they called a storage economy. So every year on farms, people would come together, harvest their grains, mill it, and bake it all in one session, and then store it like these discs in the ceiling. So there was a hole in it, and it kind of looks like currency, like early forms of currency. This is just a beautiful old picture of women baking flatbread in a communal. This was a personal farm bakehouse. So if you were wealthy, you had your own bakehouse. But if you were more of a peasant farmer, which is not a negative term in Norway these days, people are quite proud of being called peasant. If you were kind of a gentleman's farmer, you had your own oven, and you would keep it running for 5 days and invite the neighbors over to make flatbread. So here we are in this strange place, Bjørvika. This is the first season that we occupied the site. So those big towers are actually exhaust pipes for a tunnel that runs under the city. We didn't design them. So what we proposed was to give away gardens, to give away garden plots. And the city laughed at us. They said, no one's going to want to grow food in the city. And we said, just try it. So we published a call in many different languages, and 4,000 people signed up for 100 boxes. We got 150 boxes because we wanted to supply more than we had started to think about. What this did is it excited the imagination of the city, and they started to support allotment gardens in different parks around the city. And since 2012, since we've been there, a lot of urban farming has blossomed. So a group of 150 people have been there for the last 4 years now. They're called The Glory, which in Norwegian is Herligheten. And they're highly organized, but highly anarchistic. A group of beekeepers arrived and have been there for 3 years. This is what it looked like last year. And the thing about this allotment community in this particular place is that it gives people, the reason why they called it the glory, or it's kind of the glory or hope, is that many people dislike this waterfront development. It really changed the face of Oslo, and it kind of took all the funk out of the waterfront. And so people, when they encounter this, really get excited, like, oh, there's some sense of life here. So we've been working here as a way of kind of doing a ground-up initiative to a public art project, and rather than working up in a skyscraper around little models of the future of this area, we ask to always meet on site and try to include as many people in the process of what we're doing. So in 2013, we gave away these allotment gardens, and we planted 9 varieties of ancient grains, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But this area is considered a commons, and we wanted to really exercise this idea of a commons in the form of heritage grains. So the grains that we're growing are non-certified seeds that were fallen out of production in the early 1900s. So they weren't industrialized, they weren't homogenized, they're very robust, and for us they're really symbols of this thing that needs to be held in the commons. So I'll talk a little more about that. We're growing rye, barley, oats, spelt, emmer, and a few other varieties. In 2013, we proposed to make a temporary bakehouse, and I'm going to go kind of fast through this. So I talked about this bakehouse as a form of a space for baking bread. This was a very temporary architectural intervention we made for 6 weeks. We ran public workshops to build 3 different types of bread ovens. So a dome oven in the middle, a tandoor oven for making flatbread, and then on the end is a take oven, which is a Norwegian traditional flatbread oven. And the idea was to kind of test out if all these ovens could be connected in one channel and feed each other, to kind of connect the 3 different cultures of these breads. We ran several workshops, and then word of mouth kind of invited people to use the place as they liked. So this was an after-school program for immigrant teens who came and baked 13 different types of flatbreads. An anti-GMO demonstration asked if they could come to our site and end their demonstration and have soup at the bakehouse and bread after the demonstration. We also had a canoe oven that we used to pollinate this idea of future farmers coming, starting a flatbread society, and proposing to make a permanent farm and bakehouse. We would row around the fjord and then end up in different neighborhoods and bake flatbread. So this is a walkable and rowable boat. We also have a radio station called Radio Ramona. The microphone is in a baguette. So all of our interviews are still streamed online. And last summer, we held what's called a soil procession. So last summer, we got permission to permanently be on this site. But the site has no soil, and we're proposing to grow grains and have an urban farm. So we thought it would be interesting to ask farmers around Oslo to bring a symbolic amount of soil to the site to lay the foundation of this new farm and also create a portrait of farmers who are growing food for the city. We invited them, 50 farmers, to the edge of the city, and we processed through the city and to the site with horses and goats and chickens and wheelbarrows and flags and the king's tractor with 9 tons of soil. And we ended up on the site and signed a declaration of land use that we wrote with many of the key collaborators we've been working with over the years. And the declaration was signed by the main people who've been working with us and the soil, of course. The soil that is present on this document was a mixture of all the 50 different soils brought by the farmers. And I think Tom Loser's hand actually put it on the document. Is that true? Not true, but he mixed it. When we got to the site, we asked each farmer to bring 1 handful of their soil onto this big flatbread sheet and then mix all those different soils into a new culture that we named Losetter, which is a Norwegian name meaning city commons. So this place was renamed and declared a cultural institution dedicated to agriculture, city agriculture. And the reason we did this is because all the other buildings and institutions on this waterfront are considered cultural institutions. So the opera is there, the Munch Museum, the National Library, and now us. The days after, we spread the farmers' donations out and put name tags for all of the farmers. And over the next months, hundreds of people came to visit the soil, which was interesting. So that was last year, and the idea of what we were doing was just building healthy soil. It wasn't designed, landscaped, really anything. It was just, we have to have some base here in order to build a working farm. What we asked for from our commissioners was the money to hire a permanent farmer. And for me, this, as an artist doing a public art work, as a non-Norwegian, I really felt it's important to give a lot of this money back to the community. And for me to have someone have a full-time job out of this arts funding was something I was aiming for. So we partnered with the Farmers Union. This is an old poster from the Farmers Union, whose motto says "By og land hand i hand." It means city and land hand in hand. And we asked them if they would match us in funding a farmer 50-50, and they said, we'll fund a farmer 100%. So now we have a call to hire a farmer, and next week we'll hire a farmer. So here we are back at this port, and we feel like we've come a long way in 4 years. We have the land, which is an infrastructure of sorts. We have a community there, and we have this history of this place being a space of exchange, and we wanted to somehow pay homage to that. Often when we were on the shores, we would see this old boat passing by, and this is a 1895 rescue boat whose job it is to go and just rescue boats in distress. And we hadn't figured out the form of the bakehouse yet, but we thought maybe we should borrow from this design and design the bakehouse in the form of an abstracted boat. So these are designs for the bakehouse that's going to be built this summer. The idea is that it's the hull of that boat is the centerpiece, and on each side is a different space. So on the right is a bakehouse, and on the left is a greenhouse that's heated by the bakehouse, and the top floor is just a seating area that's heated by the ovens. These are 3D models that are just to get through the planning commission. It won't be that square inside, but the idea is we will have those 3 ovens again, and all of these windows will open, so the whole space will become quite large. And right now, the interior hull, in this rendering they have angles, but we're making them curved. Right now, we're working with a boat building studio 3 hours away from Oslo to bend the main beams. So this is the studio we're working with, and a kind of stage for the jigs. They have great steaming capabilities. And they're bending each beam, and all of them are different angles, so they have to build a new jig for each one. So we're coming to Seed Journey and why I'm here in Madison and what I'm doing during my residency. So I'm just going to go back 1 second to this boat. Well, no, I won't go there. So when I saw that old boat that I showed you a minute ago, I said to my commissioner, I said, wow, wouldn't it be great to take a sailing journey on a wooden boat with our grains on a reverse migration with these old grains back to their centers of origin. So from Oslo to somewhere in the Middle East, sort of an untying of anthropology and theories around how we domesticated grain. And my commissioner said, let's do it, fantastic. So that was in 2015 when I proposed that idea. So today we're going to go on that journey. I'm going to take us through that journey as far as we can get in this short amount of time. So this afternoon we're going to go on a journey. As I said, this building is our craft, and we are the crew. I need to hand out the rope to our rope tire. Hang on. Seed Journey is a reverse migration of seeds between Oslo and northern Turkey. We can speak of this voyage as a return or a retracing of a very ancient route, combining human and non-human initiatives by which wheat was domesticated from the wild and then slowly made its way through gifts, trade winds, and sea currents from the highly cultured Middle East to the barbarians of the north. Handfuls of ancient varieties of seeds from plants grown in Oslo, hailing from the Tigris and Euphrates valleys, will return to their lands or origin on this sea voyage. This rescue has at its aim the protection of growers' rights and access to these seeds. It's conceived as a form of resistance against the protection of intellectual rights and in the domain of biology. Seed Journey sails upon a rescue boat built by the famous Norwegian shipwright Colin Archer. This was built in 1895. This vessel is owned by the Peterson family, who has a very long tradition in their family of being explorers. This was the ship this winter. And we actually have two captains now. So this is he's not looking at the camera, but our captain on the right is Johan Peterson. On the left is Jarl Solberg, who considers himself a Viking sailor, and he is going to produce our journey and make sure that we get to all the ports in the right times and places. And that's Stein Skiffeliers, who you will meet later. He's a future farmer who will go by land in a van and will be our land base. So if anyone gets seasick and needs help, we'll have an out. This is a provisionary map of our journey. So we'll be leaving in September. Actually, no, we're leaving in about 10 minutes. From Oslo. We will go to London, and we will go to Antwerp for the winter, where we will leave the boat, and we will start our big journey April 1st, 2017. And I'll talk about these stops a little later. Each stop is basically on the map because there's either a group of farmers that are growing heritage grains that are quite active and that we want to collect their seeds and take them as well along on the journey, or there's a cultural institution that's offered to host us. So in Antwerp, there's the Moss Museum, which is the museum of, it's a maritime museum and contemporary art museum who's situated at the port. So they're actually helping us get into the port and then helping us program for the winter. Lena is a place in northern Portugal, which is a really small mountain village that thinks that they were the first to domesticate grains. So they have this really special rye that grows in a very high altitude, and they have a whole mythology about why they were the first domesticators of grain and how they were the first to be civilized man. We have been invited to Palestine by a group called the Catan Foundation, and a woman named Vivian Sansor, who's building a resilient seed library with Palestine's first botanical garden. And we thought that that would be an interesting pairing, but it's quite charged politically, and it could be very tricky in 2 years. So that's kind of a floating destination. Our final destination will be Istanbul, and we're hosted by a cultural organization called SALT, and they're focused on how art institutions can deal with climate change for the next 4 years. So they see a really direct connection to these seeds that we have in terms of resilience, and these seeds are very robust in terms of they can change and acclimate to changing climate. So that's our journey. Take a deep breath. Our captain says we should not be stuck on time. So there's a rotating crew of artists that will come on and off this boat. Some of them are here. And we will have some timestamps, but basically the fair winds or not fair winds will be our time clock. A man named Doug Tompkins, who's always been a hero of mine, maybe some of you have heard of him, he just passed away recently. But this summer I asked him to endorse the Seed Journey, and he said this, so I'll read it. Seed Journey is an example of retro-innovation, pulling smaller carbon footprint technologies from the past and using them as tools for redefining the path of development. Sail transport and seed revival are examples of this. 10,000 years of patient and highly diverse plant cultivation by millions of farmers produced a commons in seeds that is nothing short of miracle. Seed Journey is a seminal effort to reclaim that commons and draw attention to seed savers and growers reviving the work of those who evolved, cultured, and saved seeds over millennia. Now is our time for reassessment of the green revolution, retro-innovation in ecology, growing, and sailing alternatives to the techno-industrial present. So he was the founder of what was called the Foundation for Deep Ecology. He also founded North Face and Esprit. You might have heard of those companies. And he sold out of those companies in the early 80s and bought a huge swath of land in South America and turned it into a national park as a way of preserving land. So we have our crew sitting here in the front, our main crew. I would like to invite the archivist up for a second. Can you come up for 1 second? So, hello. On any good ship, you have a great library. A lot of it's technical and used for navigation. But I'm going to read you hang on, let me see. I'm going to actually, before we start this book list, I'm going to ask our archivist quickly to read through some of the skills that we have in the crew. Just before we go any further on the journey, I want to make sure we feel secure in the crew and our skill set. So can you read a few of those? What? I think we're good. Is that good?
Yeah.
It's romantic.
My skill is that I can teach others to do My skill is that I can teach others to do jumping stars. Is it?
You're talking on the light, sorry.
Oh, the
Here,
light.
Boom, boom, boom.
Thank you. Skill, I am an avid writer and I love journaling and poetry. Singing, entertainment.
That's good.
Good. And a chef.
Keep going.
Yeah, a ritual could be performed to keep us grounded. I can recite poetry and inspire the crew. Good at breaking tension. A substantial leadership, entertainment skills. I'm a good conversationalist. I could blow glass. Parenting, I can be loving and motherly. Maker of miniatures and other practical things, and repairs. Knitting dishcloths and washing clothes. Singing, humming, whistling, sailing songs. Forming appreciative, powerful questions to foster positive change.
Okay, let's stop. We'll do part 2. Let's first part 1. Can you stay with me for a second? Okay. So I'm feeling really good about the crew so far. So we are Flatbread Society. We perform new agrarian rituals, to be defined. We start from a flat earth perspective as a way of rethinking the trajectory of civilized persons. We are Flatbread Society. we perform new agrarian rituals. We start from a flat earth perspective as a way of rethinking the trajectory of civilized persons. We need to orient ourselves, but I might wait till the end to do that. And how I was going to orient ourselves, which if we have time, I would watch the opening scene of Werkmeister Harmonies by Bella Tarr. So if you want to write that down and we don't get to it, it's a beautiful scene that I might get to. Before we go on this journey, and as any journey that Future Farmers embarks on, we like to look at who we are among. So we are among others who've done this before, and we should learn from their mistakes and their successes. So one expedition that I'd like to refer to is Fridtjof Nansen's Fram. Fridtjof Nansen was an explorer, a Norwegian explorer, who wanted to be the first to get to the North Pole. He tried once in a ship, and the ship got crushed by ice, and much of the crew died, and they didn't reach their destination. So he called upon Colin Archer, our shipwright, to build a ship that would, so he figured that how they would get to the North Pole is not actually by sailing, but by jamming the boat into a glacier, into an ice sheet, and having the ice sheet move for 2 years, and it would eventually, through the ocean's current, reach the North Pole. So he needed a boat that would not crush. He needed a crew that could deal with not sailing for 2 years. When you're sailing, you're busy, and you don't get on each other's nerves because you basically don't see each other. You're in shifts. You have something to do the whole time. But if you're sitting in the dark of winter on a boat that's not moving and it's stuck in the ice, you need to prepare. So he had a windmill on the boat that would power an arc lamp in the dark of winter. He carried in an amazing library, which our archivist has collected a short list of those titles that we'll read in a second. He made the crew write a daily newspaper. So they had a little printer, and they had to account for exceptional incidents and some non-exceptional incidents. And the hull was built incredibly strong and lined with reindeer fur, and it had full trees across the base so that it wouldn't crush. And if you read some of these accounts of this journey, the thing that's most striking is the sound of the boat creaking from the pressure of the ice and the anticipation of, is this thing going to hold? They didn't make it. They made it the furthest north in this era, but they didn't make it to the North Pole. They sailed back. I'd like you to read this list. You can read it like that. So these are a very abbreviated list of, I think, around 30 of the 800 books that are on the boat.
Abbreviated list of books in the onboard library. Soul Life and Intelligence in Animals, From the Chinese Wall to Japan in the Woods, King Christian VIII's Diary, Science and Religion, English Pronunciation and Grammar, The Birds, The Story That Transformed the World, Great Thoughts, I. At the South Pole, The Loss of John Humboldt, The Paradise of the North, Adam and the Wide, Wide Sea, 5 Weeks in a Balloon, Modern Miracles, The Wonderful Life of Christ, The Casting Away of Mrs. Leeks and Mrs. Allenstein, Norway in 1848 and 49, The Rise of the Dutch Republic, The English at the North Pole, The Short Story of a Long Life, The Diary of a Pilgrim, Island Nights Entertainments, The Review of the Reviews, 1892-91, London News, 187-84, The Boy's Voyage Around the World, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animal, Civilizations Historic, Political Works, Climate and Cosmology, Descent of Man 1 and 2, The Great Ice Age, How Can the North Pole Region Be Crossed, Climate and Time, Handybook of Meteorology, Textbook of Geology, Handbook of Zoology 1 and 2, First Principles, The Movement and Habits of Climbing Plants, Physiology, Psychology, Geographical Distribution of Animals 1, 2.
So we have our body of knowledge.
Should I keep these?
We'll keep them Thank you. So the from means forward in Norwegian, and actually Future Farmers has dedicated several exhibitions to this expedition, and it was kind of a coincidence that the boat that we're sailing on was designed by Colin Archer, because he's been a muse of ours. Another ghost that is in our, that's a ghost, the white pixel. That's in our trajectory is Thor Heyerdahl, another Norwegian hero and explorer who you might have known. He sailed the Kon-Tiki. But a more interesting journey in my memory is the Tigris. I was 7 years old when this was happening, so the Tigris, I have to read a little bit of this because it's shadowy in my mind. So the Tigris was built in Iraq, and he was trying to prove that Iraqis and people living in that region had sailed around the earth, and there was trades between the Middle East, South America, and he wanted to prove that on the Tigris. So he worked with the reed, the Iraqi, I forget the name of the reed Moors. There's a reed farmers who made these amazing boats, and he built this reed boat and set off on sail. He was sponsored by several different countries. They were under the flag of the UN. And where they got to on this journey was Djibouti. It was between Ethiopia and, I'm trying to think of where, sorry. It ended between Somalia and Ethiopia because there was a war going on, which they really didn't know much about this. So they were sailing, and they got into this super hot zone. And from the water, they thought these two countries were fighting each other, but basically it was America, or the United States, and the Soviet Union using these two places to launch a war, or to grab the land and grab the resources. So these two lands were really being used for a war between two other countries. And they were so horrified by this, and they were asked to stop the journey, and that it was too dangerous to go on. And Thor Heyerdahl was like, I'm going on. We're going on this journey until we die. But as they were sailing, they started to think about the fact that they were in the midst of this war, and that they had the eye of the UN, they had the eye of these different countries, and they decided to burn the boat in a protest and write an open letter of protest saying, I'm going to read a little brief of it. Today we burn our proud ship to protest against human elements in the world of 1978. Now we are forced to stop at the entrance of the Red Sea, surrounded by military airplanes and warships from the world's most civilized and developed nations. We have been denied permission by friendly governments for reasons of security to land anywhere but in the tiny and still neutral Republic of Djibouti. Elsewhere around us, brothers and neighbors are engaged in homicide with means made available to them by those who lead humanity on our joint road into the third millennium. To the innocent masses in all industrialized countries, we direct our appeal. We must wake up to the insane reality of our time. We are all irresponsible unless we demand from the responsible decision makers that modern armaments must no longer be made available to people whose former battle axes and swords our ancestors condemned. Our planet is bigger than the reed bundles that have carried us across the seas, and yet small enough to run the same risks unless those of us still alive open our eyes and minds to the desperate need of intelligent collaboration to save ourselves and our common civilization from what we are about to convert into a sinking ship. It sounds like Tompkins' endorsement of Seed Journey. So this was just a map of where they went. And Thor Heyerdahl's quite a prominent figure in Norway. He's one of these guys, boarders. I have never seen one, but I've heard they exist in the minds of some people. One last ghost I want to bring forward in our canon of operation here. These are scientific expeditions, ethnographic expeditions, and ours is more of an art/anthropological expedition. But I wanted to share Chris Burden's Ghost Ship, which was a work he did in the early 90s, where he worked with a group of boat builders who build by intuition. They don't make a map, they build by knowledge and intuition. It's a boat that is navigated normally by star navigation, But for this boat, he built in a GPS system, and it was a manless or personless boat that was programmed to enter into Newcastle, where there's a race of wooden boats, and kind of intervene into this sports event. People were baffled. You know, they were so into the race, and then they saw this ship with no people on it, and that was this thing that was left in the psyche of that moment. And now it lives on the side of the new museum in New York. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a permanent installation on the side of the museum. So here we are, back to the seeds. We are responsible for carrying these seeds on the ship. We're taking 12 varieties that we've been growing in Norway, all of which have been fallen out of production in the early 1900s and then rediscovered in strange locations. And I'll just tell you about one. So one was found in the roof of this building between two boards. So this is a traditional Finnish barn and sauna where they would dry grain and also bathe themselves. A historian thought maybe there's some old grains in this barn, and he got permission to take apart the roof, and he found 9 grains between 2 boards. And he planted those grains, and 7 of them came back, and they're this amazing race of rye. It grows 3 meters high, and from one seed you can get 1,200 seeds. It's called Svedgarug, which means slash and burn rye, because it was last farmed by Finnish slash and burn farmers, which is a type of farming where you burn a forest and you grow food for 10 years and then you move on. We retrieved it from a farmer named Johan Svard, who is one of the only kind of public figures who's growing heritage grains, and he's become our mentor. We were able to retrieve some seeds from the Vavilov Institute in Russia 2 years ago that were saved in Norway in the early 1900s by Fridtjof Nansen, sent to Russia and saved in the seed library. They were saved through the siege of Leningrad by scientists who actually chose to starve to death rather than eating the seeds, and were found with seeds in their pockets when the Allied troops came into St. Petersburg. We were able to get some of those seeds, and Johan has been starting them on his farm, and they've now gone through 3 years of production, and we will plant them this year. Time to go.
The mic is not picking you up real well.
Sorry, yep, hi Kate. Just some pictures from the Vavilov Institute. It's an amazing place if you can ever go there. It was the first seed bank in the world, started by Nikolai Vavilov, who collected seeds from all over the world. And it was, oddly enough, protected from being bombed during the siege of Leningrad because they were next door to a hotel where they were going to have a celebratory party after the war was over. So this hotel was protected next door to the seed library. So that's a little vignette of the seed journey. What I'm doing here is I'm working with a group of amazing students in a seminar called The Ecology of Research, Seed Journey. It's on Fridays from 1:15 to 4:45, no, 1:45 to 4:15 if you ever want to drop by. And we are all working together to think about this seed journey and to think about the individual students in the class and how their work can connect to this journey. And we will have a performance on April 22nd at the Gates of Heaven, which you might know. Doesn't look like this anymore. But it's a church on the lake that was moved across the city in the 70s. Synagogue. Thank you. One of 4 synagogues, 4 of the earliest synagogues in America. It's not used as a synagogue anymore. It's more of a public space, and we were lucky enough to be able to use it for one evening on the 22nd. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm building the rescue boat that we will take on the boat that will hold the seeds. So this is just super quick prototyping, thinking through form and scale. But we will have 12 varieties of seeds that we need to hold in some sort of watertight container. We'll be collecting seeds, and we actually want to have a boat that if our boat went down, this boat would survive and carry these seeds to shore. So I'm working in the wood shop. Thanks to Tom Loser is hosting me in a corner up there. And I'm just thinking through how can this collection of seeds grow and kind of have a mechanism that if it's full, a sail would pop up and it would sail away. So I think I will stop there for questions and answers, and thank you for your time and your skills. Any questions? Do we do questions and answers? Yeah. Okay. No burning questions. Wow. Okay. If there's no questions, is there one question? Okay. Thank you.
Amy, with the seeds that you have come across, have they also been used for other purposes, such as energy, like there is the National Renewable Energy Lab in Boulder that looks at different plants and what possibilities they have for fuel and things like that. So have you been also looking at what else they can be used for besides food?
That's an interesting question. No, for sure that has not been something that we've thought about. And actually, I don't feel the most versed to talk about it, but so this is a very personal opinion. But I think I would want to be very careful with these seeds. There's something special about the fact that they fell out of production and they haven't been selected for different uses, because from the research I've done, it's a very slippery slope on how we use the plants that we have. And I know it's a big argument right now about using seeds for human consumption versus fuel or versus animal feed. And my personal feeling right now is I want to try to protect these seeds predominantly for human consumption. Yeah. Yep. James.
To further amplify on that question of seeds and their purpose, obviously the seed has its own purpose to grow, but once we've subverted that to our own end, is anything known about the original uses of these seeds in terms of bread or beer or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, these particular seeds were grasses. So, in a sort of contradictory way of what I just said, where I want to focus on human consumption, and that's a very just kind of focused idea right now. They were domesticated for beer, for bread, and as far as I know, that's basically what they were domesticated for. They were also domesticated to withstand different weather patterns. So and seeds have an incredible memory. So these seeds that we're growing in particular, there's like a metabolic memory to them. So if there's a flood, there's something that they remember how to survive in a flood. What's happening when seeds are homogenized and selected out for a very specific use, they don't have that memory anymore. They just know how to do one thing very well, or two or three things very well. And so we're trying to preserve this diversity that's, already was selected out of it for sure. It's not as diverse as a grass probably. But that's what I know. There was another question. Yeah, Marianne. Oh, sorry.
So working collaboratively is not a very common model for artists, I don't think, and so I would like to hear you speak a little bit to that, because it seems like your collaboration is, morphed over time. And then, so I'd like to hear you talk about that a little bit, but then also this idea of the crew, and are the crew your collaborators, or how do you think that sort of relationship will change under that name and the proximity of being housed in that place?
Okay, so we are a collaborative, and I think all of us come together because there is a real deep desire to connect through making. I think we're all a little bit socially awkward, and that if we're touching and making something together, there's a language of exchange that's not verbal, and that is, it kind of transcends an exchange that, it's a type of exchange that transcends language or even touch, I would say. And I think we're all very committed to challenging how we can connect to each other and how we can connect to people that we maybe don't relate to. And for us, making things together is a way to do that. And food is one very kind of easy way to connect to people. We often do put ourselves in really awkward situations, and we like the tension. Like maybe we're, I don't know, masochists, but we do like we do fight. And we like to kind of go through those emotions and challenge each other to be better people. Like we really kind of push our buttons. And Michael Swain and I have been collaborating for 22 years, Dane and I for 13 years. Muriel Milisevich, who's in Germany, her and I have been for 15 years. And we're all really like family. And last summer, to get to the crew question, we lived on 2 boats, not just one, but we lived on 2 boats to test it out. So there was 9 of us living on 2 boats. So there was 5 on one boat and 4 on the other. And we lived for 6 weeks together, and we only had one meltdown. And it was the night before the soil procession, which we knew it's the most stressful. You know, we have a performance the next day, and none of us had been sleeping properly. And it was over, the meltdown was over the fact that there was too many cooks in the kitchen. We all packed into one boat on that day to make coffee, and it was just too many people in one place, and we just had to leave each other. It wasn't a terrible meltdown, but it was the first tension we had. But I think we all thrive on that. And Michael Tossig, who's an anthropologist who will join our trip, his focus of the trip is actually the crew and the social scenario of that crew for the whole time. So he'll be writing and studying that. Yeah, there was a question back there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if you connected with tribal communities in the U.S. There's quite a movement in terms of seed saving and with Native American tribes, and I'm wondering if you connected with them.
Yeah, I didn't talk about a project that we're doing, but we're doing a project called the Indigenous Farm Project, and it's working with reservations in District 9, which is an area that the Environmental Protection Agency looks over in California, Nevada, Oregon, and parts of Washington. And you can look it up. I'm peripherally involved. There's a group of young future farmers that are working on that. And I'm peripherally involved because I've mostly been working on the Oslo project. And I'm very torn by that because I'm from the United States and I'd really like to look deeper into that for sure. Yep.
You said you were surprised that people came to look at the soil.
Oh yeah, I was surprised. So several times, so those soil circles that were there, we lived in a boat right next to the site, so every day we'd go check the site and talk to people. And on several weekends, there were farmers who hadn't brought their soil, but they'd heard about their neighbors bringing the soil, and they came to see these soil circles. And one farmer said, oh, that's my neighbor, and it's so great that he brought his soil. I'm a bad farmer. And I said, what do you mean a bad farmer? And he said, well, I use chemicals, and we did invite only farmers who were organic farmers. And I said, that's not a bad farmer. I mean, I know enough that you have constraints that you have to deal with. And we just had a really amazing conversation about why he has to use chemicals or why he thinks he has to use chemicals and the politics around a larger scale farm in Norway versus a smaller scale farm. But for me, that was the greatest kind of tourism, like farmers to take time to come into the city to see their neighbor's soil. Yes?
Do the 12 seeds that you have, do any of them exhibit perennial rather than annual characteristics?
Yes, so the Svedgarug is a perennial. And so you plant one seed, and then the first year it's 12 little tufts of grass come up. And then from those 12, each one has a sprig of like 100 or 120 seeds. So it's an amazingly prolific seed. So one seed can produce about 1,000 to 1,400 seeds. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you fund this project?
Fund, good question. So Oslo, this development project has a % for public art. I don't know if you have that in Wisconsin, but in California we have it too. Maybe you don't have it anymore? Did you ever have it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Someone told me I wasn't coming to Wisconsin when I came here. They said, it's not Wisconsin anymore. Okay. So Oslo has the same thing in California. So 1% of every development project has to go to the arts. So this is a massive development, right? And I think our budget is $3 million. We have a commitment to work with them until 2018. And the money is public money. So for us, it was really important to include the public in this process because it's their money. And it's every time we meet someone who says, oh, you're working in Bjørvika, that's our project. You know, people feel very connected to it being their project. And there's a really strong discourse between the public and art makers, which is great. Yes?
So do you consider any community gardening as a work of public art? Or is the utility of something that provides produce sort of separated from the realm of public art?
That's such a good question. I don't like categories, and I wouldn't even say, I don't necessarily need to say what we're doing is art. I think it's a form of creative I think a community garden is about, in a public space, is about an expression of a way of life. And I think public gardens are really important because it's kind of like a gateway into our connection to food, to farming, to the politics around it. It creates social cohesion. And if that's art, I think that's great. Like, that's what I would expect from art.
Have you had any issues, since it is a public project, apparently it's pretty high profile, do you have any political issues with GMOs and whatnot, especially with a perennial crop?
Yeah, so Norway doesn't have GMOs yet, and they haven't tested any yet. They don't grow any GMOs, and they spend a huge amount of money policing all the food that comes into the country to make sure it's not GMOs. So it's definitely challenged by the EU to change because Norway used to be really rich because of the oil, and recently, because of the whole shift in the oil industry, their economy has kind of crashed, and so they're having to deal with the possibility of having to accept some of the EU laws around plant genetic treaties. But they aren't there yet, and part of our goal is to kind of preemptively save this area as a commons that's dedicated to non-GMO plants in perpetuity. So to kind of extend that commons, yeah. Any other questions? Yes, James? Are there any other questions before James asks again? Just give someone else. Yes?
When you talk about the project in different venues, one of the things you talked about, I think it was in relation to the Oslo project, is the idea of wanting to build into the project the idea that you don't quite know where you're going, and keeping it sort of open-ended. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, and then also maybe give like a little bit of a teaser for Michael next week, what people see if they can.
Okay, so Tom asked about this idea of flatbread society and how we're working, being not over-planned and not so determined that there's no space for chance or improvisation. And that's been a huge challenge, but our we have this amazing commissioner named Anna Beata Hovind. And she's like our boss, but we live in her house, and she provided the boats, and she's just amazing. And we have always tried to maintain some aspect of chance or improvisation in the work, or unexpected. And that can sometimes be we just don't tell everyone what we're doing, and when they get there, they're like, oh, we didn't read that this was happening. I mean, that's a strategy. Our first year, there was a curator involved, and she wanted to do a massive, spectacular press release for everything we did, like when the canoe came, big press, BBC, Guardian, and we said that won't work. That will not work for what we're doing. We have to start from word of mouth, and we don't want any press. We don't want any posters put around. We want to start really slow, and maybe we'll use smoke signals, but no press. And it was a tension between the curator and ourselves. That was resolved, but it was something we had to really hold fast to, and it has worked because people, I think if you come across a place by word of mouth, there's something very special about it. The thing that once the bakehouse gets built, I mean, of course it's a public art project, so there's building restrictions, there's all kinds of things that will make all of this magic go away really fast, I'm sure. But the core group who we're working with are 10 different types of practitioners. So there's bakers, beekeepers, chefs, farmers, yoga instructors, a Steiner school, and 2 small artist-run spaces who want to use the bakehouse. And we've all agreed to try to create some sort of alternative economy because it's a public space, so we can't sell anything. And we've had 2 seminars on what would that look like, what would that mean, and to even avoid a community currency. So to try to really think about what do we value and how can we come up with some exchange value for service, for knowledge, and for just being in that place. And actually 2 days ago, the city of Oslo sponsored a conference to think about this with us and to use our site as a test for what an alternative economy could look like. So for me, that's something that's unknown, and our commissioner has really helped us to keep this place as a test bed, and we hope it can always just be some place where people test things out. Maybe part of it is a permanent farm, but a farm always changes, so that keeps it slightly dynamic. And we'll see. I mean, we'll see how it goes. It's a society. It will have its challenges. Oh, and a teaser. So I didn't show a lot of Future Farmers work because Michael Swain, my collaborator, is coming next week, and he's going to show some of the work that we've done together and then his own personal work, because we all have our personal practices besides Future Farmers. Michael's an amazing artist, poet, and teacher, so it'll be definitely an experience, and you should come. And he'll also be in my class on Fridays, and if we have a very small class. If anyone wants to stop in, please do. So come next week. Thank you.